I'm ready.
So, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome to the online series of the SOLA seminars. Hopefully, we'll move it to level 1 soon and we'll resume our face-to-face, well, the hybrid versions of our seminars, which used to be face-to-face and online. But for now, since we're still in level 2, we're going to keep them as online for now. Today we have a research topic by Dr. Andreas Wesener, a mobile sense of place, a user-centered methodology to study urban cycleways. Andreas is a senior lecturer in landscape architecture here at Lincoln University. So as per usual, please make sure to mute your microphones during the presentation. If you have any comments or you would like to ask a question before the end of the presentation because you have to leave, feel free to use the chat box to write your comments or your questions. Otherwise, we will open the Q&A at the end of the presentation and feel free to speak up or to write your comments in the chat box. Make sure to unmute yourself before you start speaking. And for now, I'll pass it on to you. Thank you, Andreas.
Okay, thank you very much, Nada. Tēnā koutou, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining in today. So the topic of my presentation is called A Mobile Sense of Place, and it's really about the experience of urban cycleways and how we can actually capture this kind of experience. So in my presentation, I will give an introduction to the topic and to the research in general. Then I will say a few things about our research goals and research process we went through, and we'll let you know about some research findings and of course next steps, because this is actually an ongoing project. There are 2 stages to it, and we have just started in August the second stage of it. But before I start here, a few words about our research team. So this is from stage 1, which was a project which was externally funded by the National Science Challenge 11, which is called Building Better Homes, Towns and Cities. And this is really about the urban environment of New Zealand. There's a diversity of topics, and one of them is, of course, urban transport within the context of urban design. So our research team here was all ESD, so ESD is our faculty. I took the lead of that, and there was Suze Valens, Sarah Edwards, Gillian Frater, and Richard Morham involved. And Richard is as well part of our current team, so the second stage. We were lucky to be able to publish as well our research. It's an open access publication. You see it here down on the screen, so you can access it for free. There's no paywall, and it came out this year. Very shortly about stage 2, which is a very short one. We got ESD, so faculty funding, until the end of the year. And this time I'm taking the lead again, and we have a bit of a different team, much more computer science oriented. So Stuart Charters and Pat Anthony joined our research team, and Richard Morham, as a constant, is there again. Before I start about the project itself, a few words about why it is relevant. Cycling and in general active urban transport has become a really big and relevant topic in recent years for sustainable urban design. Cycling in particular has been promoted all over the world, including Christchurch, because it has so many benefits for urban development and for the urban environment in general. So it has been called the ultimate zero carbon environmentally friendly solution for personal transport. So that's obviously an environmental goal. It is also like the most equitable of all transport modes, because there's very low individual investment costs involved. So bicycle, affordable, highly affordable mode of transport. And of course, there is a health benefit, or the various health benefits for example, increased cardiorespiratory fitness. So cycling has been in the literature as well called an important contributor for better population health. So all of these benefits of cycling are really a no-brainer for cities to trying to promote more cycling and to integrate it more into the urban environment. Of course, cycling depends, like most things in the urban environment, on the built environment. So if the cycleway infrastructure, if the cycling infrastructure is a good one, it is very likely that more people will pick it up, more people will cycle in the future. And Christchurch City Council has noticed that early on. This is a quote from the 2012 Christchurch Transport Strategic Plan, and there already they noted that urban form and functioning are really important variables if we want people to walk, cycle, and use public transport more often. In consequence, the council was really active in recent years and developed a network of major cycle routes across the city. So there, as you can see in this image, which is, I think, from March this year, should be more or less the newest stage. There are 50 major cycle routes across the city. Some of them have been built, some are under construction, and some are future projects. And once they're all implemented, they allow cyclists to go in all directions around the city in a really convenient and particularly important safe way, very often segregated from motorized traffic. However, despite all the benefits of cycling, there has been a bit of a backlash, or called Bikeless, the Bikeless phenomenon, not only in Christchurch, but in many cities around the world. So there are obviously groups of people who are opposed to new cycleways, opposed to new cycleway infrastructure for various reasons. And there has been a bit of a discussion in the literature lately what actually makes people so angry about cycling. I mean, it seems to have all these advantages. And it comes often from retailers and residents, particularly from those who are directly affected by cycleways, for example, by using on-street car parking spaces. So it's basically a NIMBY phenomenon. But, and that's probably most surprisingly, there's also a bit of a bikeless phenomenon coming from cyclists themselves, who, as experts, have not been properly, or at least feel that they have not been properly consulted about those cycle routes. And this is the reason why it has been proposed that it is really important for stakeholders, for city councils to have ongoing consultation with cyclists as a key source of expertise when they think about expanding or building or modernizing their cycleway network. So for us, it was really important when we started this project to get input from those key sort of stakeholders who are involved in integrating cycleway infrastructure. In this case, because it was a Christchurch-based study, it was the Christchurch City Council. So we had a sort of stakeholder involvement stage of a couple of months where we interviewed relevant staff that was involved in designing, planning, implementing those cycleways across Christchurch. And we also, so this was a really important stage for us because we did get a lot of information from those from the stakeholders, but also it helped us to identify really what was needed in terms of research. And as you can see there in the background image, we identified a whole range of different areas where research could be done that would be helpful, in this case, mainly for the city council. However, many of those research questions which came out of it were either not feasible for us because we're working with limited time and limited budgets and limited staff, obviously, to do the research. So either we couldn't do it, or it was just not the scope of the research was not appropriate. But anyway, we were able to identify one key question, which was repeatedly told us that would be really an important factor for the stakeholders when they designing their cycleways, and that is actually the question: how do users experience those major cycle routes? So MCR is the abbreviation for major cycle route. And the city council tried to get some of that information from cyclists. So there were surveys, for example, but none of these were actually looking at the cyclist while he or she is cycling. So it's there has never been a survey that directly targets cyclists while they experience cycling. And that was for us an interesting topic, and which is reflected in our research goals as well. The thing with cycling, and this is really different from other modes of transport, especially cars, is that cyclists are actively experiencing the landscapes, the urban landscapes. They have to pay particular attention to certain features of the landscapes, such as particular road surfaces, obstacles. So they're much more directly involved in the place than other traffic users. And therefore, our main research goal was really to gather information about the cycleway infrastructure and how it's perceived, generated directly by a cyclist while cycling, so in situ, in the space itself. And what we wanted to do as well is to create an easy to use and cost-effective mobile method, which can be basically used by a whole range of different users, not only sort of expert researchers. So we had to develop a research method. There was nothing sort of pre-existing. It's a bit of a novelty. So what we did is we combined different data sources in order to capture the experience of cycling, but also the sort of objective physical infrastructure. So we're using video, audio, and the sensors of a mobile phone to do that. And what we basically explore here is the relationship between the physical environment and how cyclists perceive it. So we have a smartphone which is attached to the bike, which captures a relevant sensor and geospatial data, and we have a 360-degree camera which captured the video and audio data. That's how it looked like. It's a relatively ordinary sort of urban bike. The mobile phone is attached, and what you see here on top is a 360-degree camera, which could be directly attached to the mobile phone. We wanted really to make sure that the handlebar is not too cluttered, and that is a really sort of easy setup, which can be used by regular cyclists as well in the end. We had some problems with the camera because it fell off a couple of times, but we actually managed to keep it fixed with some unorthodox methods. And if you're interested, there's more of this in the paper. Our method is based on an existing one, which is Thibault's parcours commenté, or also known as commented walks. And we adapted this method for cyclists. So basically, in our method, cyclists are not accompanied by an interviewer, but they let alone on a predetermined route, and they can freely talk about what they see, what they smell, what they hear, what they feel while they're cycling. So they're not actually influenced by any other person. They can freely talk. And so we capture their experiences then via audio mainly. Here's an overview about the data which we collected in the field. So you see most of it is captured during cycling, while cycling. So we have the sensor, video, audio, and geospatial data. And then we have one data set which comes after cycling, which is the rated cycling events. So this is a sort of reflective data set where we interviewed the cyclists about certain particular events which we could identify through the either the audio or the sensor data, and we wanted the cyclists then to rate those events in terms of from on a five scale Likert scale from 1 to 5, which means 1 was very positive and 5 was very negative. That might have been the other way around. I'm not quite sure now, but it was from 1 to 5. So once we had developed the method, we need, of course, to test it, and we used the existing major cycle routes in Christchurch as a pilot study. So at the time of this first stage, there were 8 sections either fully or partly implemented in Christchurch. So we tested the gear, the software, we collected the data, and then we analyzed it, which means we categorized the data. We tested methods of visualization and interpretation. And this one was mainly done on one case study, which was the Papua Nui parallel cycleway. And this is an example of, as I said, we divided those experiences into particular cycle events. This is one particular event, and there you see how different kinds of data come together in one particular event. So here, that was a very negative, rated 5 event, and we see an unsuspicious green surface, a normal cycle route. There's no visible bumps or anything seen, but then there is this reaction from the cyclist, and still the video doesn't show any bumps. And the cyclist is saying there was a very surprising bump on the cycleway that wasn't really easy to see. And afterwards, the cyclist rated that event very negatively. And then we look at the sensor data. We can see actually this bump showing up in the accelerometer data, and we can identify then as well where it happened via the GPS data. So this is just one example. There's a multitude of different cycle events that happened, even sometimes in very short turns. And then, as I said, we tried to find a way of capturing all those different information together in one form of visualization. And this is one attempt to visualize it. So what we see here, all these little bubbles here are the cycle events. So each bubble is one event which happened in along a route, and it took the cyclist along this route 18 minutes from A to B. So this is like the time of cycling. What you see here below is in the green line is the speed, so we can see how fast the cyclist drove. Here, obviously, it's 0. Those have been traffic lights, so there the cyclist had to stop. And what we see here is the accelerometer data, and every peak is basically a bump in the road. So we have a lot of noise down here, so no major bumps here, but then there's always a few sticking out. And we overlap those with the qualitative data, the data which we received from the audio, basically what the cyclists told us. And here we already categorized this data in different categories. For example, this is all about debris on the cycleway. This is all about interactions. For example, a dog running across the cycleway, and so on. And the surface quality, of course, is really important. So like this, we try to identify which parts of the cycleway are particularly pleasant. For example, we have here a period, there's an environment category where obviously it's very nice to cycle. However, there are a couple of problems with debris and the infrastructure itself. And then we have other phenomenon as well, where we have really high peaks here in the accelerometer data. So there's a big bump, but the surface quality around that is not actually considered too bad. We looked at this particular incident, and we found it was actually a speed bump, and the cyclist was very positive about it because it slowed down the cars. So it does mean that not every bump in the road is actually a negative cycle event. We have to really look into the detail here. So here are some findings from that first research stage. I mean, first of all, I think we can say that our methodology really responds to this call for more consultation with cyclists, and really looking at their immediate expertise and their immediate experience while they're cycling. And this is really a novelty of this method. Normally, cyclists' experience is somehow captured after they cycle, not while they cycle. We also managed to establish a really low-cost, compact mobile method here. So the whole investment for our gear here was around $2,000, and that includes the mobile phone, which was the most expensive item actually. But we can assume that most people, or most cyclists at least, they have a bike, they have a mobile phone, and they could use the camera and the built-in microphone. So there's no real extra costs for cyclists to do that at a larger scale. And I mean, and also it could be done by amateur cyclists, not by professional researchers. The data collection process was relatively smooth because we tested everything really well in advance. However, where it became a little bit more problematic was when we got into the research analysis, the data analysis process. And we worked with Excel sheets. We had a lot of manual data analysis. The visualization was not automated either, because we couldn't find sort of graphic tool that allowed us to visualize what we really wanted. So we had to do it manually again. And that's really one of the major sort of barriers, I would say, to enable widespread application of the method at the moment. And that's actually where our next research step kicks in. And this has, as I said, just started. And we got some faculty funding for that. So what we really try to improve here is like the automated analysis and synthesis of the different data types, and also trying to improve the way of visualizing the data. We're going to use some of the existing data from the last round, but we also intend to create new data so that we will have new cyclists in the field collecting new data, and hopefully improve our collection method as well with regard to what we need afterwards to automate the analysis process. Okay, and that was in a nutshell what we have been doing, what we're still doing with our Cycleway research. Thank you very much for listening.
Great, thank you, Andreas. That was very interesting. We have 2 weeks in a row the topic of cyclists, one from a gender perspective